All right, so I think we should be good. I got the chat up. Can somebody post into... Actually, I got it. Hold on. Twitch.tv/Surgent. Here. See if I remember how to spell my own fucking name. G-A-T-M. There we go. All right. Well, thank you guys for attending said panel. I'm basically practicing, quote unquote, for my my actual live one that I'm going to be doing in June. I'm going to ColossalCon up in Ohio, and I'm actually got approved for a set of 3 panels. This is the first of which, because last year I did it and it was awesome. It was wildly successful beyond my freaking dreams. And I expected like 3 people to show up because it's an anime convention. So you think, oh yeah, Dungeon Master and anime convention, you know, at least that's what I thought. And then like the whole room was packed from the beginning, and we had to turn people away consistently the rest of the time. And it made me feel like a freaking rock star. At least the closest thing I'm ever going to get to a rock star. So
That's really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. So I'm trying to refine it and get my time down. That way I can actually like fit everything I want to fit in. But it's going to be a set of 3. It's going to be this one, which is how to kill your players and have them enjoy it, which is GMing 101. The second one is how to make your GM swear, which is how to be a player 101, and then how to blow your Earth up, which is basically world building, like how to do world building collaboratively with your group. And I'm hoping that all 3 of those will be consecutive so that people will, you know, visit each one. But this is the first of which. So, do you guys need a handout? Do you want a handout? Because I got my Google Docs up here. I can share it with you guys so you can follow along. If some of
I'd
you have...
appreciate one.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
I was just going to ghost your stream, but yeah, that'll work.
There you go. All right, you guys can actually jump right in and take a look at exactly what I have planned out. So, how many, besides Crayon, I know Crayon GMs, but how many of you guys have actually GM'd or considering GMing?
I started GMing on the net. Been somewhat consistent, putting out 2 runs a week or so.
Okay.
I've done an Apocalypse World campaign, but I don't feel comfortable yet with Shadowrun rules.
Okay. I will let you know right now, you will not be.
Yeah.
I have not met a person yet that can comfortably look at that book and say, I don't really need to go over that again. At least yet.
Shadowrun is insane.
Shadowrun book is, I'm not fond of it. D&D was much simpler. Same with some of the other games like Paranoia.
Yeah. Oh, Paranoia is simple? I don't know what version you were playing.
Not simple, but the players don't need to know the rules, and that's the key.
Wisconsin, Dan, how have you guys been DMing long?
I've been DMing for home groups and whatnot for like 15 years.
Nice.
Shadowrun, not so much. I never played 4th edition, but I played 3rd and 2nd.
Nice.
Shadowrun 5th, I came back. I've run 1 game for ShadowNet so far, and I thought that went fairly well.
Okay.
Plan to run more in the future. So.
All right, Dan?
And I want to be a DM sooner rather than later.
Okay. Well, hopefully this seminar is mostly oriented towards people fresh into it. This is a very basic gender neutral. I've been on Tumblr and Action too much. This is a very very basic system neutral coverage of like the basics of GMing. Hopefully, you know, Wisconsin, I'm very glad to have you on board. Hopefully everybody can pull something away from this as we go through. I'm going to say that a lot of this is from my personal experience. I've been DMing for something like 6 years. I did a lot of forum role-playing before that, where it's no rules. Basically, all you would do is you would type out a novel collectively with other people and basically tag other characters in. So my basis in DMing has always been very, very story-based. If a rule conflicts with how I want a scene to go or how I feel a scene should go, I will say fuck the rules and allow them to do it. I found also that most of the times that this has occurred, if you don't allow it to happen frequently, it leads to some of the most epic things that you could do. Good players really love it when you can just bend the rules a little bit for them and allow them to do something that they're really excited to do. So, so as you can see on the sheet, you'll see the first top 2 100%. If you take nothing else away from this talk. You should take this away, these top 2 rules. And the first one is you may be the DM, but everybody, including you, is there to have fun. That is numero uno. If you are not following that rule, if you're trying to kill your players, if you're trying to, specifically stick it to that one player who's acting like a jerk at the table, stuff like that, you have lost the core concept of what it is to be a GM, in my opinion. It's a game. It's a hobby. We're literally taking extra time out of our lives to craft stories. And if you're not having fun doing it, and your players aren't having fun doing it, then literally you're wasting your time. I think that's a pretty good blanket statement.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
And the second one is you're not death incarnate, nor are you the untouchable god of your realm. You're still mortal. I know some of us, even at times in our home games, we get a little bit airheaded, filled with our own ego of being able to control what our players do. And sometimes we take offense at things that we really probably shouldn't. And sometimes a healthy reality check is in order. Again, going back to that, it's a game. Everybody should be having fun. It is of my strong opinion that a GM should not ever consider killing their players goal number 1, because then it's antagonistic. It's not we're all having a good time telling a story together. It's let's see how we can either screw the players over or how the players can get around what we're trying to do to them. And that, to me, I've never had fun playing that style. I know other people that do. It's definitely not 100% in the rule. If you can find players that like to do it, go for it. But again, 9 times out of 10, I have seen that creates animosity between the players and the GM. Generally try to avoid it. So those the two like cardinal rules of GMing. You're there to have fun. Don't try and kill everything, and don't get a big head. Sound good? Kosher?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So behind and again, we've kind of explained the reasons behind the rules. It's a game. Games equal fun. No fun equals no players. If you're actively making your players not have fun, they are well within their rights and capability to get up and walk the hell out. And you don't really have much place to say that they can't do that, But there are things that you are there to do. You're resistance. You're the story. You're the plot. You're divine intervention. You're anything and everything from the smallest blade of grass that person trips over in the battlefield to the gods that will allow them to do the epic thing they want to do. You're everything. You're literally the world, and they are just the players. But you are not there to tell your story. That's a big indication. You are there to tell their story. The world revolves around your players, and you are there, again, in my opinion, to make sure that happens. Whether that be, through death, life, after death, the people that are trying to kill them. You're there to tell a story, right? And you're there to bring specifically life to their stories, because they're there to take part in the world that you have built, but playing it from their player's perspective. So while you create the realm, they create their story. You're there to guide them to something where they will be talking about it for the rest of their lives. At least in my opinion. That's my goal of every game, is to have them walk away talking about it in the positive. You may not have that every game, and everybody has their off days in the hobby, but that should be your goal, is to have them talking about it. So, general rules to make this happen. I like lists. And actually, I hate lists, but lists are the best way to get certain things across. And in this particular case, there are a certain set of rules, again, in my opinion, that the DM should follow in order to guarantee that the story experience is good between the DMs and the players. The first one is what happens in the game stays in the game. And to me, this is very important, because in character, a lot of things can happen. Just in my last game that I played of D&D, I think yesterday, there were players that were looting gold off the bodies, and they weren't planning on returning it. It was a bunch of kobolds that had stuffed their pockets filled with loot, and were running away from a burning village. And so they started looting this, and they didn't plan on giving it back to the villagers. My character was like, hell no, that's all that they have. You should give it back. And this can be bad. At least in character. This creates inter-party tension. It puts players at odds against each other. However, you as a DM have to remember and try and draw a line between when that in character becomes out of character. the player and I, we just really didn't all care that much. I was just trying to stay in character, But when people start arguing and getting heated over things that aren't in character, that's when you as a player, as a GM, need to start stepping in and basically playing referee to make sure that, if it does get heated in game, that the players aren't taking it personally. That they realize it is just a game. Step aside, cool off, maybe throw a rule in or two, move the scene along away from that, things like that. But that also goes double for you as a DM. Don't hold things against your players that they do. If it is in character and they somehow manage to completely sidestep around the puzzle that you managed to plan 3 hours for, right? And you had this whole thing revolving around it, and you were ready to go, and it was all said and done. It was going to be awesome, and then they find a way to completely sidestep it, or they don't want to do it. They want to go do something else in the game. It's up to you as a DM not to hold that against them, because they as players decided that that's not the direction they wanted to go. You gotta kind of let it go and come up with something else. It could just be equally as awesome. Rules should never trump story. And then I put in parentheses, almost never. Because generally, if a player is very excited about something, that means they're invested. They want to do this really, really badly. I had a guy who wanted to suplex a beetle off of like a 15, 20-foot cliff. And he was real excited about it, but he had like 2 hit points left. And I'm like, in my mind, if he does this and we roll it according to the rules, he's probably going to go down. And he might die because there's beetles on the bottom. So I knew it would be fun for him. I knew he was excited to do it. He wanted to do something awesomely epic. So I said, okay, tell you what. If you make me an acrobatics check after you get off to put it below you, I will let you roll less damage because you're falling onto something squishy on the ground. He did it. He actually managed to get 1 point of damage instead of the normal damage, and he proceeded to beat the shit out of the 2 other beetles. He was talking about that for 2 weeks after to all of his friends about how he got to suplex a beetle off of a cliff. And he was so excited, and I thought about it, and I'm like, it didn't break the game. The rules are there to do a specific thing. You guys remember playing Cowboys and Indians when you were younger, or something similar? Banks, cops and robbers.
Yeah.
Nerf guns, man.
Hell yeah! And you would run around and you have your little L-shaped gun made out of your hand, and pew pew pew. And what always happened was you would shoot the other kid, and he would go nanner nanner nanner. You missed me, right? Right? You'd always have that kid that you fought, that you were up against. The rules are in place. The systems are built specifically to prevent that from happening. And that's it. That's the only reason the rules exist, is to keep us, who are playing an adult version of Cops and Robbers, from having the DM go, nanner, 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 you didn't hit him. That's it. Because you have a solid reason to come back to it and say, I hit him, he is dead. Put him in the ground. I don't want this type situation. And if you look at it that way, it suddenly doesn't become as serious. If you're playing D&D and, there's a person getting all up in arms about how things are done, just remember, you're playing an overgrown sized version of Cops and Robbers. You're just doing it with dice. It humbles you just a little bit, but it's still fun. It's something that we like to participate in. But the rule, if something's awesome, sidestep the rule. Don't worry about it, Let the person have their fun. However, if it breaks the game, you can piss off the other players, which is not good. So be careful with how you do that. But use the rules instead to foster ingenuity and not to quash their excitement for their storytelling. Resolve any conflicts after the game. It's a very good rule. Very, very prominent rule. You're the GM. Your word is law, period. What you say goes. Now, most people use this as an authoritative iron fist, and a lot of players chafe under that type of direction. I'm not saying do that. What I'm saying is the 2-minute rule. How many of you guys have heard of the 2-minute rule?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look a rule up for 2 minutes if you don't know. If you can't find it, make a verdict immediately and move the game along. And then after the fact, break time after the game, look up the rule and see how it should have been run. And if the players like the way you ruled it, continue with that rule. If they don't, say, okay, well, I apologize. I had to make a decision to keep the game going, and we will be rolling it this way from now on. Now, there are some players that you will get that will absolutely be, horribly chafed under this because they absolutely know 100% this is the way to do it. And they want to slow the whole game down so they can find out that they're right. Well, sometimes you just got to tell people to suck it up. And it happens with Shadowrun all the time. Like it really does. There's so many rules in Shadowrun that a DM cannot remember them all, unless you've been playing it for 10 years. It's a very complicated system. So you'll always have people that know what their stuff is, and that's okay. They're very passionate about it. All you have to do though is, again, I'm not sure it works that way. Take the 2 minutes, look it up. If you can't, make a verdict. And make a verdict that will keep the game going. So if in that case it's like, all right, I believe you. After trying to look it up for 2 minutes, I couldn't find the rule. We'll run it your way, and then we'll move on. And at the end of the game, look it up. And then say, okay, here's, if you're mistaken, admit it. Be humble. We're DMs. We're not infallible. So be humble. I was wrong. You were right. I'll continue running it in my games this way. And if he was wrong, be humble. Don't rub it in their face. Players definitely don't like to be proven wrong, and they hate it worse when the DM is freaking even worse about it. So talk to your players, but don't be bullied. It flows really well into this rule. Communication is the key at your table. Always encourage open communication. If your players are having a problem, listen. Don't brush it off. There are several things that this could fall under. Everything from, hey, I really don't like the way this guy is playing. Don't dismiss it. It could be your best friend in the world, your girlfriend. That has happened a few times at my tables where somebody has come up to me and is like, dude, your girl's acting a little weird, a little crazy. And it's like, okay. So I would, as a DM, I would pull my girlfriend aside and talk to her, and say, hey, some of the guys aren't liking how this is particular plays or anything we can do to resolve it. Went over really well, actually, So results may vary, especially with girlfriends, so be careful. But
oddly enough, it's normally I've found the girlfriend or the significant other that gets in the game to play with their boyfriend or girlfriend that generally has that particular problem.
Exactly. And again, approach it as though it's your table. You are in charge. You're the referee. So you're the one that has to make sure that everybody's playing nice. So, but it's communication. You have to talk to people. If you get the passive aggressive, oh, well, he'll stop. Just ignore him. It won't stop. You have to talk to people. But at the same point, don't be bullied. Don't let the rules lawyer at your table constantly push the rules on you. At some point, you have to draw the line. Don't let that person that's on the phone all the time stay on the phone. If they're not having fun, they can walk out. But you have to stay in control of your table. If your player has come up to you and does not feel comfortable with something, it is your responsibility as a DM to address it. And sometimes it'll go over real shitty. Like, this is a real personal comment, but there was a point in time that I had another Dungeons & Dragons game that started up, and the DM was very excited to play a homebrew system. I decided to play a gnome, a female gnome. And the way that gnomes are described in 4th edition is they don't have the same sexual limitations or qualms as most other cultures do, but they're also very trickster people. Like they love getting people over. Their lore is filled with people that got away with things. Oh, this dude stole from the giant. This dude managed to get land from a king without him knowing it. Stuff like that, as opposed to like human deities. Oh, he defeated the giant dragon on the mountaintop in his home cave, stuff like that. So I made a character that was pretty close to that. And we had another female player on there, and she actually liked the character. She thought it was a very three-dimensional way to approach a seductress, pretty much. But she was flirtatious. She didn't just sleep with people, Well, the 3 other guys at the table didn't look at it that way. They immediately branded her the party whore and proceeded to say some really derogatory stuff in reference to the character. And that really upset me as a player. So I talked to my DM about it. I said, hey, this isn't okay, the way they're treating my character. I'm starting to feel a little put off based off of that. Because I even told them, hey, this isn't how my character is. And they didn't care. while I was having the conversation with the DM, the woman came up too. And she said, I'm starting to get uncomfortable with how they're treating his character because it makes it feel like, I'm getting hit with this too as a woman. Okay, well, don't worry about it. They'll stop. I'll say something. And he said one thing when the break was over, and they kept doing it. And they kept doing it. And they kept doing it. And the DM didn't stand up and say anything. And eventually I got up and I literally started screaming at these guys, to cut it out because they were making people uncomfortable. And it ended up actually the woman walked out, and she has, to my knowledge, has not played another game of D&D since she was a newbie. She was
that's sad.
Yeah, she was so turned off by it, and that's what I said too. Like I even told the guys after, I'm like, your actions directly caused somebody to give up on something, that they were trying because they wanted to enjoy it. They felt like shit afterward, but that doesn't change what happened. So as a DM, anytime I come to a table and that stuff starts happening, I cut that shit out immediately. I will not allow that type of talk at my table. And I've straight up told somebody, either you quit it or you're walking. Like, I don't care if you're my friend. This is unacceptable. And he stopped, and the whole party had a good time afterward. Like, some people just like testing the limits. And that's fine, as long as they stop after they're asked. But again, back to the point, don't be bullied. As a DM, don't allow yourself to just take something like that laying down. Stand up for it. If your players are feeling uncomfortable, step in the way. Okay? On a lighter note, the next rule is be prepared to improv. This is something that all DMs know. Going into it, you're going to have to make shit up. Your players will do things you do not expect, period. You will say, here's a door, and you have it unlocked, and they will find a way to blow a hole in the wall because they don't want to trigger the trap behind the door that they're convinced is there. Right? I'm sure everybody's had that experience at least one time. The overly suspicious party decides to come up with a convoluted plan to get around the door. And then it doesn't work anyway.
Intentions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and as a GM, you have to be prepared to either redo your description or to improv what would happen. Every DM has a story about players going off the rails, and how you handle it dictates to them whether or not you're prepared to handle them. The best DM I've ever played with, he had a whole story planned for us at one point. And as soon as we sat down at the table, we just started going. And he put things together so well. Everything was so well so well done. The NPCs were real three-dimensional, pulling everything together. And after the session, I walked up to him and I said, "Dude, this is great." And he's like, "You guys went off the rails the first fucking paragraph. That was all bullshit." And I looked at him. I said, "You're joking." He's like, "No, there was not a single part of that I planned." Because we went so far off. But he was an amazing improv artist. He took notes on everything that happened and then redid the story to suit the direction that we wanted to go. And it ended up being a fucking amazing campaign. Like, it only lasted a couple months, but the way he pieced everything together, he was real in tune with the party and what their goals were. And as DMs, that's our goal, is to provide that what the players want mentality. Sometimes. They can't pin dragons if they really don't want to, but they can try. I'm not going to stop a player from trying, and he's probably just going to get his head bitten off. But yeah, always try and keep your improv fresh, because it will happen. As I've played, I've found one of the hardest ways to DM, in my opinion, is pre-planning. Now, there's a certain amount of pre-planning you have to do, period. But when you plan out 30 pages worth of story and NPCs and meeting places and encounters based off of your assumption of what the players are going to do, you will be wrong 100% of the time, and it will make your job a lot harder. What I do is I have a different approach to it. And anybody that's played or GM'd in my Shadowrun games knows that this is how I do it. I will come up with 2 or 3 big events that I want to happen that game. And we'll take an example. I had did anybody remember the Mitzi plot from the Runner Hub? Was anybody there for that?
Yep.
I know Epoch was. But basically, the mayoral race had happened, and we were going to have a particular person win.
I only shot a clone in the head once.
What I did was I came up with a different plot line. I said, this is right after I started GMing Shadowrun. I said, this is not how I see this ending. I said, this is how I would see this ending. And I come up with a storyline. And I basically pushed 3 events through. They would steal something. They would then guard the thing as it was changed. And then they would plant that thing into the voting system. And it changed the whole election. Those are the only
One of those runs was literally the best run I've ever played in like 6 years of playing role-playing games.
That was the infiltration and planting.
I think I had a GM say, fuck, I give up, was like one of the best ever. And then you kept going because you didn't give up. You just said so I'd feel awesome.
Yep. It was so basically they were taking voting sins. They were taking sins, which all of you guys should know by this point since you play Shadowrun, is a license, a type of license that's associated to a particular character. And the group previous to them, that was not the same people that did this, had basically guarded as like 15,000 sins were wiped, aka 15,000 citizens were wiped and replaced with fake citizens. And then they were put into the voting system as having voted for the popular candidate at the time to make it look like voter fraud. Well, Epoch, his character at the time, Striking Crayon, had a character called Epoch, who was just a fucking terrible person, but he was a great face.
Yeah.
And they had to break into the voting system's place and distract the higher-ups and plant those voter IDs on the database that's there. Single-handedly, one of the most bullshit runs I have ever DM'd, mostly because as soon as they walked into the building, I had no idea what they were going to do.
On recon?
Yeah, so the first plan, I planned on them doing recon, leaving, and then coming back at some point when it was quiet.
To be fair, we planned on doing recon too.
And I didn't know, so I'm just like, okay, this is how it works. And they got in, and a particular way I described something. I think it was either you, Crayon, or it was Rook, who came up with the fact, like, wait, there's only like 4 people here. We could do it now. And immediately my GM mind went, shit, how did I get myself into this? But I kicked it into a different gear. I'm like, okay, as soon as he said that, I shifted gears and I said, okay, this is the player's intention. How do I meet those intentions? Like, what can I put in the way that will give them a good run without, like, making it seem like I'm trying to make them do something else? Because this is what they wanted. They wanted to do it then. Okay. So they started structuring and layering and coming up with their plan, and I would throw wrenches into the works every so often. Like, okay, so the secretary is paying it. She's actually an attentive secretary, and that's right next to the tech closet. So that's goal number 1, is to get them distracted. And Crayon stepped up immediately and said, "I'm gonna put the swoon on her." And just managed to role play out this really well done, basically flirtation, and trying to get her attention, and really managed to get her comm code, and and they're like, okay, we're gonna have to find a way to get all this information onto the database. So he comes up with a way. It's like, I want to talk to the salesman while I'm here, and proceeds to bullshit for 25 minutes, almost straight, bullshitting the sales guy while Rook and the hacker get everything onto the system. And I was throwing wrenches in the works there too. Like, the hacker ended up getting marks on his system. And Epoch saw that, and he started distracting the guy from answering the marks. Like, all in all, it was really well done, but most of that run was improv, because I hadn't planned on it. It ended up being a spectacular run because I took things that made sense and used it. And placed realistic barriers in their way, and made it a pretty fun run. I got pretty good responses from that run.
It was hella challenging too, because you kept it legitimately on point. You just moved the objectives into different places.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you're.
Is there a bot? Is there a bot of that run?
Yes, I think so.
Remember
this
what
was
you said at the
before I
very
started
beginning of
streaming.
that run?
I wish I would have streamed it.
Yep. That was a long time ago. That was like December.
Yeah, I don't think I streamed any of those runs.
That is the run that's made me stream all of my runs, even when I don't care about stream. It was like it made me record them at the very least, because you never know when something awesome is going to happen that you want to take a highlight from.
Actually, that's the reason I started doing it too, because that happened, and I'm like, God damn it! I wish I had proof now. But oh well.
That run was great too, because like as the GM, you basically put a lot of effort into making sure. Like, that's the kind of run that really could have gone all face, or in more agnostic terms, it could have become very single character focused. And as one character was going on, in this case, my character was at the focus, you kept throwing up wrenches that myself, as my player, and as my character, couldn't handle by myself. So we were able to spread the attention over the entire team. So all three of us all were heavily invested, heavily focused, and heavily role-playing just to keep up with what was really a one-person story. Because you were rebuilding it, you're going from the perspective of, okay, when do I need a wrench? Here's a wrench. When do I need the next wrench? Here's another wrench.
Yeah. It's and that's that's all improv. You have to I work by the I call it the cinema rule. And in the cinema, everybody gets equal face time. Like, even the shorter characters, like, everybody has to have an equal amount of face time and to do what they want to do. And it keeps everybody invested. So basically, I did an initiative order in my head. I said, okay, Epoch's going. All right, now Rook's going. All right, now Haliax is going. And I just kind of kept cycling back. And then, like, once somebody had done, like, an action or two and role-played it out, I would switch to the next character and give them something to do. And it kept everybody invested the whole time. It's in my opinion, it's a very good rule to stick to. Because you don't have to deal with the whole face conversation at one time. Always make sure the other characters are heavily invested as that main character and getting everything done.
What you did really well in that run as well is, like, when, even though the face character was heavily invested and focused on a lot going on, you gave wrenches that they couldn't deal with on their own. Mm-hmm. And Shadowrun particularly has an amazing mechanic, DNI, to make this even more easy for the GM to pull off.
Yeah, because it would basically be, oh shit, we got a mark, somebody deal with it. You know, because they know they can't, and it would force another character to act. It was pretty fun. I really enjoyed that game.
I would have to say that being able to improvise is probably one of the GM's strongest tools. I know you touched on it, but if you sit there and try to plan everything out, your players will foil you at every aspect. Mm-hmm. If you can't improvise a run, like, one of the best things I love about 5th edition, I don't know if they did it in 4th, they didn't do it in 3rd for Shadowrun, is the random run generator. No, seriously.
No, I know. I love that.
I think I'm crazy, but before you put up your run, like for ShadowNet or run your home game, sit down, look at the random run generator, roll some dice, make a random run. That will give you all the key points that you need to cover, and from there, you have your key points. You can literally bullshit the rest of it. And oftentimes, it will turn out to be a better run than if you had spent 3 weeks and a notebook planning it out yourself.
Yep.
Because you can tailor it to each specific person.
Okay, so the very last part of this one is avoid gotcha moments. This was huge. This was a huge way to play, and it's almost indicative of an antagonistic GM-player relationship, is the gotcha moment. Basically, it's the GM saying, gotcha, and the player's getting fucked somehow. I was reading all of those Shadowrun files from back in the day where basically they're like, these how the players were stupid, her type stuff. And it was interesting because it really let me see how the GMs viewed their players. Most of the time I view them as cooperative. I'm a storyteller, so I view them as the people that are cooperating in my story. Or I'm cooperating with their story. Either way, we're all in it together. But stuff that I saw in there was like, oh yeah, they had this whole underground run plan, and they were going to blow up the bottom of the building in the sewers, and they got down there, and the manhole locked above them, and they went, we activate our flashlights. And I went, what flashlight? And I went, oh, god damn it, really? Because I hate that. I, as a player, hate that shit. It aggravates the piss out of me, because it's so micromanaging. Like, I have a I have a thing called assumed competence, and I'm sure you all have heard that if you've been talking with any of the GMs on the ShadowNet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you basically assume that while the player may not know entirely what they're doing, the character is going to, because they have survived this long. And any Shadowrunner, in my opinion, worth their salt that goes into a sewer without a fucking flashlight is an idiot. So I assume that they're not trying to play idiot characters. I'm assuming that they're trying to play super awesome, criminals for hire, that would understand that going into a dark place means taking a flashlight with you. So avoid gotcha moments. Avoid those points in time where it really will screw the player over with no way of them being able to counter it. Snipe. Go ahead.
To you about that a little bit more.
Sure.
I did a run 2 days ago where I think this happened with me, and it wasn't intentional. And I'm wondering if I could just talk about that, maybe as an example, and you could give your comments on it.
Absolutely.
If you need the reference, I have the permalink for the AAR I wrote for it.
Okay.
But basically what happened was I did a run that was supposed to be a high difficulty run. Not prime, but definitely one where there was a good chance of risk and dismemberment. And the theme I was going for was they were sent to hunt a vampire. And this vampire lived off the grid, so he was very hard to track.
Okay.
But the Johnson, who was also a vampire, and it was fair to assume a rival of this guy, informed him that he went to this church fairly often, that he was aware of that, and they could possibly get leverage from that.
Okay.
So they did their legwork. They go to this church. I specifically planned it as part of the theme of Easter for Good Friday. And what happened was, they start digging some data on this guy. They get the right tools to kill a vampire because they have very specific things you need in Shadowrun. They're a little bit different than ordinary vampires. And one of the characters, Nathan Archer, he's a face, and he's one of my favorite characters because he's a bit of what I would call a glorious bastard.
Okay.
He's not a good guy, and he's a con man, and he kind of does confidence tricks a lot, and he gets people to like him, and then he screws them horribly, and it's great to watch.
Okay. And
what ended up happening was the way I wrote the story was that this vampire's last living descendant, his great granddaughter essentially, is working at this church, which also is an orphanage, and the church has a lot of really good tech in it, and it doesn't have locks and stuff, and it's very out of character because it's such a terrible area, but nobody touches this church. There's no gangers nearby. Their material's really good. The kids are really well taken care of. They have really good quality food and teaching supplies and all that. And I figured this might set off a bell in the character's head, and I gave them kind of the opportunity to get all the legwork done, and they figure out, of course, that this girl's his descendant, and their plan is to kidnap her and use her as leverage to draw out this vampire so that they can kill him.
Okay.
Get him into a position where he's not safe, where they can draw him to a situation of sort of their choosing.
Yep. Which is a classy thing to do as a Shadowrunner.
Yeah, it's exactly like the kind of thing you would think, because this guy was a very competent character. They did some digging and figured out that he actually wiped out a couple gangs some months ago.
Okay.
And what ended up happening was one of the characters, Nathan, he plans a date with this girl. She's starting to get interested in him. She's not usually getting much attention, a little bit religious. And the date's scheduled for 4 p.m. on Friday. The one legwork they didn't get was when the vampire visited the church. They didn't pick that up, and I was kind of frustrated over this as a GM in the sense because I didn't know what to do about this, because the way I wrote the story was the vampire would show up every Good Friday at sundown. Okay. And of course they kidnapped this girl at about 5:20, and then Nathan comes back to the church to inform them that she's been kidnapped. And that's exactly the time when this vampire goes into the church to do his donations in the basement. So I roll his perception check. I tried to play him as what I would call a fleshed out PC, but an NPC obviously, and he overheard Nathan talking about this. And then he got closer, started sneaking, sensed Nathan, and picked up on his emotions, which were to say, obviously a little bit suspicious, a little bit duplicitous. So his reaction is that he's going to knock him out, drag him down, and interrogate him. And then Nathan fails his hearing check, and the guy kind of clubs him in the back of the head instantly. It's a vampire. He's tough. drags him down in the sewer, and at this point, that's when the player burns Edge in order to live.
Okay.
Because there's a good chance this guy's going to drain him dry.
Yeah.
I kind of struggled with this moment for a long time afterwards, and at one point I actually just kind of stopped the run for a few minutes because I wasn't sure if I made the right call there. I wasn't sure if that was a gotcha moment, you know?
Yeah,
it played into everything I wrote, and I did give him somewhat of an opportunity to escape it, but in many ways it was kind of like a horrible coincidence where he was just in the wrong place at exactly the wrong time.
Okay.
And they didn't have that legwork, but that legwork was a little bit obscure. The only way they would have gotten it was searching the church directly for it. Like, you would not have figured this out
that's why. Okay.
Throughout any outside data. Because
so my suggestion on something like that, when I plan out a run, I don't plan specific. I plan basically what I would need them to find before the run can move on. Like, basically, I was told a long time ago. I'm a writer too. I don't write a lot, but what I do write, I take pretty seriously. And I started investigating mystery novels at one point, and the best advice I'd ever seen is when you're writing a mystery, start with what happened and work your way back, and figure out exactly like what piece of evidence would be left where, and build the story off of that. Because basically, you're going to have to, after it explodes, you're going to have to lead the player through picking up the pieces and every assumption along the way. Shadowrunning specifically is kind of like that, especially if you're tracking somebody. You want to come up with what happened first and then leave the trail of evidence for the people to follow. In this particular case, what I do is I find 3 or 4 specific items that I want them to find. I won't guide them toward it, but I will say, and I will not put any strings on it, just as this is the information. And they will start doing their checks. They'll start doing, calling contacts. They'll start checking the matrix. And I will let them go through it, go through the paces. And when they come to a point where they have rolled high enough, I will give them that piece of information out of my little pool. It's not saying, okay, here's the blood splatter at this location. If they walk by it, it's gone. They don't get it. What you can do as a GM to prevent that type of scenario from happening again is basically give them little tidbits. Like, hey, you might want to check out the church. Like, have one, if they're calling their contacts, like, yeah, some creepy stuff has been happening at that church. Like, even if it's completely untrue. Like, I hear ghosts are in there. There's no fucking ghosts in the church. But it makes them interested because, hey, it puts that at the forefront of their mind. And say, hey, there might be something at the church that we should go look at. And that's when you can give them that little piece of information. So basically, that's managing player expectations. And that's something that we're going to cover a little bit later. But basically, your players come into something and expect a result based off of what you're giving them. And one of our many jobs as a GM is to manage those expectations and lead them through the story. And sometimes it's like leading a horse to water. Other times it's like throwing a ball for a dog playing fetch. You'll throw it and they'll bring it back and like, what do I do with it now? Pick it up, throw it again.
Yeah, I think that's where I maybe fell a little bit short. I didn't manage the expectations fully. I kind of painted most of a picture. They got essentially 3 out of 4 of my tidbits, but they didn't get that bit.
Yeah, and that's something, and that's something that exactly, and that's something that you need to, as a DM, manage afterward. If they don't pick it up, find some other way that this won't stab them in the back. But then again, there's the other thought of Shadowrun. It's you missed it. Yeah,
that was kind of what I was struggling with. It's like, this is Shadowrun. This particular job is a little bit of a grim, dark job.
Yeah.
Should I punish you for missing this because it's Shadowrun, or should I just move around it? Like, if it was D&D, I would have simply been like, yeah, you're the heroes of the story, I'll move around this. Because it was Shadowrun, I decided to go with it. But
now, the other thing you could have done...
I still kind of struggled with thinking about it for a bit.
Yeah, it's all right. And you can introduce a whole myriad of things, too, if you felt like doing wrap-ups to this run. Another interesting part would have had the Nathan in the basement getting ready to be eaten, and then something happens, a Deus Ex Machina. The girl comes down looking for him type stuff. The police bust in. There's a delivery of some sorts, and that will give him an opportunity to do something. As long as you are not letting the character not do anything in response to the situation that they found themselves in, then you're fine. The results be where they are. But you should always allow the players to be a part of the scene. instead
Yeah, like
and
he
act and do
definitely was
things.
talking with the guy. He tried to con his way out of it. He came close, but he's chained up against the wall and stuff. It's
Yeah.
a little bit hard to con in that situation.
Yep, and I mean sometimes it happens, especially in Shadowrun. Like death is a part of the game, so I think you handled it pretty well. It's just some things in hindsight you probably could have done different and should watch out for when you go forward.
I admit the moment that happened, I kind of went back and I triple checked everything. I flipped through my rule book a little bit. I wanted to make sure it was something that was legitimate, and I think it did heighten the tension a little bit. It kind of created, in the sense of the players, this "oh crap" moment. Because in character, all they know is that this guy's been snatched and his DNI link has been smashed.
Yeah.
He just went off the grid.
Okay.
And I thought that was interesting in the sense, but I guess I suppose you do have to move on. But like, I just wanted to ask you about that because it was something that I was thinking about a lot afterwards. I kind of hate killing my players. I hate damaging my players, but I acknowledge that that's often how you push plot forward.
Yep.
If it's all good stuff, then it's not always all interesting.
Yeah, and we can always talk more about this after the seminar too, and get more out of it. So far, what have you guys thought about these basic rules that I've given you for DMing?
So far I think that they're very good. Some of them are pretty well laid out, but some of them you kind of have to dig for. Like the biggest one, and you've kind of touched on it here a couple times, but I don't know if you've actually said it looking through the notes, is a lot of people have a very confrontational attitude of GM versus player, and that is completely not it. You are there telling a joint story. And like I said, I know you touched on it pretty specifically at a couple points, but it's a joint story between the players and the GM. You're there to facilitate telling the player's story.
Right.
Like a big red flag to me is if you want to have a GM PC or an NPC that's with the party, you're heading in a bad direction, because that's an NPC. That's not your character. They can't take any spotlight. They can have a specific purpose, but oftentimes that's a GM trap or a pitfall that the GM will fall into.
And I left both of those out for a specific reason. One of the reasons is antagonistic is a style of GMing. It just is. There's no way to get rid of it. It's not wrong. It's not even being an asshole in some cases. Sometimes it literally, especially with dungeon crawls, like you have to be the enemy. Like there is no other way. And some players enjoy that style of playing. It's not a bad way, and I definitely didn't want to put this in the mind of this is not how you should play. Sometimes it calls for it, but I mean that's the reason for one. The other being GM PCs. That's a hit or miss, at least in my opinion. Yes, it can be a red flag, but I've played with a couple GMs that have done it really well, and they've basically used that to get the loyalty and trust of the party, and then did something with them, whether they ended up being evil or they ended up getting killed as part of a plot. Like, I agree, on one hand it is kind of a red flag. On the other hand, there are DMs that utilize that really well with their party. So again, it was something that I really didn't want to touch on, because it's a tool like anything else. It can be used well, it can be used badly, but it's just a tool. It's not again, in my opinion, it's not a bad thing. I try not to do it, because the one time I did do it, I ended up suing them something hard, and my players got pissed at me, and I'm like, oh shit, I totally did that. I'm sorry, guys. So, yeah. No, I agree. That's why I specifically didn't touch on those, though. Anything else?
Understandable. The gotcha moments, that's another big one that a lot of GMs, especially new GMs, will fall into, is like Dagon was saying there. Sometimes it's not intentional. It's just it kind of happens, and you look at your notes and it's like, how did this go wrong?
Yeah.
I think every GM has that double heartbeat moment when you're like, oh crap, I'm gonna kill somebody.
Yeah.
And you really don't want to.
Because you feel bad because you've taken the time to develop that character too. But sometimes, in my opinion, as long as you give the player an opportunity to make their death worth something, then you're good. And sometimes you can't do it. As long as the player is okay with what's going on, that's the important part. If they just outright die, sometimes it happens. And that's the point that you have to take the player aside and say, hey, are you okay? Is this an okay maneuver? Like, I understand. Sometimes I've had a player die and he's just like, yeah, it was my own stupid fault. Like, I should have realized that this was going to end up the way it was going to end up, and I'll just either roll up another character. But death can also be an opportunity for more storytelling. Sometimes the players will drop everything to get that character back to a resurrected, or you can utilize it as a zombie. You can utilize it as a, now they have to go find their party member in the underworld and get him back to his body. Like, that can lead to a whole slew of different other things that you can do, as long as you treat it not as a final cut, done, dry thing, and then laugh at the player. Like, oh, you were stupid. Now you deserve to die. Like, as long as you don't treat it like that, death is another part of a story.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. One of my rules that I use in my games is that I will never kill a player unless the player is okay with it. There can be some way they die, and Shadowrun has a beautiful mechanic in that, in the burning edge to stay alive.
Yep.
So that even if the dice, your GM dice are just hot and you're rolling all sixes for everything, they can always burn edge to stay alive.
Right.
I've never ever once killed a character unless the player's okay with it. Like that valiant last stand of, I'll hold them off, you guys run, or save me afterwards, I'll see you in the underworld kind of thing.
Yeah.
And most players they die for those moments.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Again, there's sometimes death can be the high point of a character's career. Is that last moment of, I may have made fucking mistakes, but I'm making up for it now, just go type stuff. Like,
right.
Players will talk about that.
The atonement storyline.
One of the coolest things I saw was the GM let the party roll to see if they could find medkits, and the leader of the team, he just couldn't find any medkits, and he was going through emotions like, I let my teammate down,
Mm-hmm.
And that storytelling was really great.
Yeah, it's good when the GM and the party are really in tune with that type of stuff too. Like, sometimes there's a certain expectation that my player will live, period, and the DM will help me. And when the player realizes that it's just it's a person and they can die, once they start accepting that and they start playing like that, it starts. Sometimes the players will get so in tune with the characters and their story around them that those emotions will start showing through. And it's always a very powerful moment. Like, I remember at one point, I had a really good party in D&D, and I had just killed one of the party members' father that they had been looking for as part of the plot. And I didn't expect it to have as much impact as it did. Like, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just like, he died so that they could continue finding the reason that he died. And one of my players started crying, the player whose father it was. And I felt like shit. And then she looked up and she's like, no, that was fucking amazing. I just need a moment. And it's like, it was really, it was a very powerful moment to see somebody connected so far into that character that they were essentially feeling what the character was feeling at that moment. But some people question that line. It's something that you do have to watch, that person does not take on the characteristics of the character. But it is perfectly fine to get so into character that you act or you emote as them. As long as once you leave the table, that is no longer the case. That's when that's where people start having the problem. So, reeling it back in. The next part. This is the most, again, and Wisconsin has said this at points, improv is one of the strongest tools that you can have. And it's worth it to practice. It really is. Coming up with things off the top of your head is going to happen with every single game, run, everything you do relating to roleplay. And making it better will only serve you better. So I came up with a few things to help with that. And basically I pulled the general rules of improv and I tweaked them a little bit. Number one is almost never say no. The actual improv rule is never say no, period. It's always yes, but, or yes, and. In this case, I said almost, because as a GM, there are definitely times you need to say no. There are very definitive times that you need to say no. The other thing that you can do with improv is, are you sure you want to do that? And that will let the character have an opportunity to reanalyze what they're doing. It doesn't mean say no. That doesn't mean that what you're doing is a bad thing. That just means, do you understand the consequences of what you're doing? And if they say yes, go for it. So in my opinion, and Fire Warrior will cover that in a sec when we say no. That's actually the next one, the next one down here. But the first, never say no. Sometimes there is just no good reason to say no. In your gut, you want to. You feel like something's wrong with it. And the rules will allow it. The players aren't up in arms about it, but you want to say no. And in those situations, you have to really look at why you want to say no. Because many GMs will just knee-jerk. No, you can't do that. And they won't give an explanation as to why because they themselves don't know. They just say no. So in case of those things, say yes, but. Negotiate. It's perfectly fine to negotiate with your players at the table for consequences. In some systems, it's actually part of the system, like the Dresden Files system and Fate, which are very, very close. Dresden Files is based off of Fate. It's actually a part of the rules to negotiate the consequences and the uses of the Fate points. You and the player will go back and forth as to what makes sense and how the player reacts to the impetuses that you give them. They spend a fate point to do their aspect, or you compel them to do something, and you two will talk to see how it comes out. And that's perfectly fine. Your players have to be reasonable with it as well. If they're going to say, hey, I want to run up the side of the building, and you say yes, but are your boots going to hold out for that long? Dun 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 type stuff, Make it an interesting piece. Again, they're excited to do it, and you should allow them to do it. But that doesn't mean that realism isn't going to hit them in the face later. So they want to stab the big bad evil guy that's laying bloodied in the middle of the street, right? It's like, let's just get the fuck rid of him. We're done. We don't have to worry about it, which is a very player thing to do. And reasonable for the players to want to do, is to kill their main evil guy. And you could say, yeah, you could totally coup de grace him. But the town guards are starting to come up, and they don't know what happened. So it may look really bad that a set of travelers that nobody knows has just stabbed a guy in the middle of the street. Right? I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation of the guards. Yep. They don't really care the fact that this dude was coordinating a mass massacre, on a scale unseen. They don't know that. They just know that you just stabbed a dude. You're probably going to prison. So it helps them think about it. Yeah, you can try and arm wrestle the orc. Absolutely. But you see something shimmering in his drink. Something is not right about the situation. And it makes them second guess it. It makes them think about it and go, yeah, I totally could do it. If not to find out what the hell was in that drink. And after the orc breaks the table with their arm, you figure out, oh, it was a strength potion. And you were here for a reason. Things like that. Are you sure you want to do that is another great way to make players think about what they're doing. Because sometimes they'll just ask questions to be asinine. They'll be like, I want to stab this guy. I have had so many players do that. Like, especially the looting part of it. Oh, yeah, the town guard is in the bar drinking. I want to steal his coin purse. What? Why? Well, I'm a thief. That's what I do. I'm like, yeah, but you're not a stupid thief. Are you sure you want to do that? Do you know what? You're right. That's probably a bad idea. I'm like, they have really big swords. They still have their armor on. And they might catch you, which is not a good thing. Okay, I see what you're saying. And they'll back off and try something different. So are you sure you want to do that? It's not a direct way of saying no, but a way of making them consider the consequences of their actions. A very, very important part of a DM's toolbox.
Some of the most powerful words a DM has is, are you sure that's a good idea, or are you sure you want to do that?
Exactly. It will, at least when I'm playing with somebody and my GM says that, I instantly reconsider what I'm doing. Like, oh God, this is going to end badly if I continue.
I have made horrible life choices.
Exactly. Sometimes it's equivalent to your DM giving you a way out. Like, oh God, this isn't going to end well for you. Do you want to try something else? And sometimes they'll say yes, or no, like, I want to do this. And if it's in character, help them, like, don't let them get off the hook easy, because sometimes stupid decisions are stupid decisions. But I've read dozens of stories, if not hundreds of stories, where stupid decisions can end up in epic situations. So work with it. Don't just shut them down, work with them. Try and come up with a reasonable in-between. Second rule, know when to say no. If the first rule is never say no, second rule is know when to say no. And I have a story about this one. I was playing a game called Godlike, which is superheroes in World War II. But it was a very realistic style of superhero. Like, yeah, you can lift the tank over your head, but you can still be shot in the face. You know, because super strength doesn't give you bullet reflection. You know, and it's a very straightforward way of doing it. Oh, yeah, you can have super speed, but you can't stop. That's not part of the power. You have to slow down regularly. You know, so if you're going 2,000 miles an hour, you have to try to stop from 2,000 miles an hour. And, you know, the judging distance. Yeah, you can fly, but that doesn't mean your body can't handle these sharp right-hand sudden turns. You have to fly like normal and take inertia into account, things like that. And it's a great way, it's a great system for making players consider the consequences of their actions. But they accept it. They leave those flaws in place sometimes and play characters with flawed powers. It's actually really, really interesting. I recommend anybody to take a look into it. But this guy, so my GM that taught me how to play on this system, it was me, him, and another guy. And then we had done a few different role-playing games together. And we were all actors. We were all in the theater for a while. So we were all really into it. And then we invited the one extra guy. And he thought it was a game. Not like a game like we were playing, but like a game like, oh yeah, we can make all the funny comments we want and do things that don't make sense. And oh yeah, the GM will totally take care of us. And no, it didn't work that way. So when we were making characters, the one theater guy made an Irishman who had healing powers so he could never get drunk again, as an unfortunate side effect. But he had telekinesis as well. I made a character that was blind but a sniper, and came with a tragic backstory as normal. And this guy made a pimp from North Africa named J-Bar, who talked like Mr. T and had a mohawk.
Oh, God.
In a 1938 campaign.
Oh,
and
wow.
he talked like this, yo. You don't know the streets. Now, this was a skinny 5'8" white ginger talking like a 6'7" black guy. It was funny, don't get me wrong, but when he asked the GM, can I make a pimp, and then proceeded to go with that is one of those moments where you say no, because it's just so ridiculous, and you know that the player's not going to be able to pull it off with a straight face. However, if he had tried to make an actual pimp, somebody who was actually running a set of prostitutes in North Africa, it was not unheard of to do. And that would have been a very interesting character. Had it been one of my veteran role players, I probably would have let it slide because I knew they would be able to handle it. But a new person coming in who didn't get a good concept, it doesn't work. You have to say no. If the player wants to start calling names at other people or mean spirits, say no. Like we had already covered that particular story. There are plenty of reasons to say no to something, but the no should only be used when it crosses lines or sets the players up to cross lines. In this particular case, he was crossing the line of not staying in character, and possibly disrupting the rest of the party from having fun as well. Number 3, focus on the here and now. The players don't give a shit what happens 5 pages from now in your notebook. They don't care. They don't care what encounters you have planned. They don't care what the big bad evil guy is going to do in 3 sessions. They care about what's happening in that encounter right then. And that's where you need to be. So if, for some reason the players manage to behead the big bad evil guy in a really critical role, you're going to have to let it happen, especially if you've already said it happens. You can't go back on that unless there's a very good reason for it. Oh yeah, he didn't actually get beheaded. You guys didn't check. That's stupid. That's a gotcha moment. There are other ways to bring them back. Things like that. But focus on the right there and now. Stay with them. Tell the story that they're participating in right then. Don't worry about what you have planned in the future, because you can always take the break, or you can always take it after the game and plan something else. Right? Like that's a pretty straightforward rule. Don't allow yourself to get sidetracked by what you have planned. Instead, play with the characters. Provide details for the scenario. Number 4. This is a big one because we're playing a game where we can't see anything. You can do all types of stuff to help with that. You can make maps, you can make character references, you can, I've even seen somebody put a video up at one point. You can play music to get them in the mood, but in the end of the day, we are not there. We cannot actively see what's going on. So we need help. You can't, I'm sorry, it takes imagination to drive people to get involved. So trigger that imagination through your descriptions. Descriptions are what drives role-playing. Don't just tell them that there's a beggar right there. That doesn't really, oh yeah, he's a beggar, whatever. Tell them how haggard he looks, how worn down he looks, how threadbare his stuff is. Especially if that's a character that they're going to have to deal with in the future. Give them a really good mental picture of what this beggar is. I mean, don't write 3 pages worth of descriptions and bore the shit out of them of it, but a pretty good description of, sunken blue eyes, stare back at you, You can obviously tell he's hungry because you can see his ribs through his shirt, and that... Just those 2 sentences, I've described a better beggar than saying, oh yeah, he's a beggar. Right?
Yes, almost definitely.
Yeah. You never fully sort of say what it is, right? You don't just kind of go, oh yeah, he's a beggar, man. You kind of let the players piece it together themselves a little bit, give them that sense of, aha, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could probably talk about like an hour on each of these topics because they are so good and they're so information. So I'm trying not to run your time up because you said you're trying to work on a time frame, but. The importance that you give in describing an NPC to the players is the direct importance that the players will put on that NPC. If you say it's a beggar on the side of the street and he's dressed in rags, they're going to think it's a random beggar. If you say it's a wizened old beggar on the side of the street dressed in rags, but you can see calluses on his hands from where he might have been a soldier in his younger days, or he has worn shoes, or an ornamental, almost polished looking old but tarnished holy symbol.
Yeah.
It puts that seed in their mind that this is important.
Yep. And that's what you want to try to do, is using your descriptions without actually telling them, hey, look at this guy. They automatically, again, player expectation management, they automatically assume that since you're taking the time to describe it, it is important. And this can be used to trick them, too, by making them look at something that doesn't necessarily have value by describing it. But you can't use that, again, as a gotcha moment. It's like, oh yeah, there's a holy symbol, and there's a chalice that's sitting right next to it with rhinestones and polished jewels and stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, you should have just touched the holy symbol instead. That's player expectation. They expected the chalice to mean something because you took so much time on it, and the holy symbol not to be important because, oh, it's just a holy symbol, whatever. You don't need to know about it. I'm not going to take the time to describe it to you. So yeah, details, sights, and you don't have to stop at sight, because sight is only one of the 5 technical old style senses. We have something like, I think like 50, not 50, we have like 20 senses last time people checked. But don't stop at sight. Tell them how things smell. You walk into a bakery and the cinnamon that they use to cook their special recipe just hits you in the face in a heavy wave of succulence. Like that kind of puts me into character. Like, oh shit, these are really good fucking cinnamon rolls. If it hits you in the face on the way in, like tastes like the air around you, even though you see the bodies decomposing, you can almost taste the maggots in the flesh as you're walking by them. That is such a heavier statement than you walk by a pile of dead bodies. Like, it really gets them into character as they're trying to picture all of these things. Feelings, you feel the sense of repression from the swamp weighing down on you as you trek through the mud. It makes them feel important, but at the same time it makes them really picture what's going on around them. And we love immersion. I love immersion. Immersion's great because it makes the players act like their characters.
Oh, nothing helps roleplay more than if they're feeling what their character,
Mm-hmm.
you want your players to essentially be their characters while they're in character at the table.
Mm-hmm.
One of the cooler things is describing background counts as like oppression or
yeah.
Describing background count is cool,
especially if it's a background count of a different tradition, because then they have confusion. They don't know how to deal with it because it's outside of their paradigm. So if you have a heavy background count for Shinto, and you have somebody that's a hermetic coming in, you could definitely do something like you feel oddly at peace, and it's almost like the things around you don't matter as they're trying to add up. And it could, like, as they're trying to force logic onto the situation, it doesn't work. Like, they just keep going back into the Zen-like state almost, you know. And that can end up accurately describing a background count for somebody who's, you know, further a different tradition than their own. And it gets them into character too, because it's like, well, shit, I don't know what the fuck's going on. My magic isn't working. I just feel at peace with the world, you know. Something you should never feel as a Shadowrunner, because that leads to death shortly after.
Right.
So the last one of the improv is, even if it seems stupid at the time, details matter. You as a DM know what's going on behind your screen. You have the charts, you have the encounter maps, you have, you know, the plot going forward, you have the details of the NPCs. You know everything behind what's going on. What we have to remember and keep in consistent contact with is that our players do not know what we know. And sometimes they'll latch onto things, even if it's just an aside. I love random item tables when you're creating characters, especially NPCs, because sometimes you'll roll the most random shit and you'll play it and you're just like, fuck it, I'll leave the ring on his finger. You know, it's just a total aside moment. And you don't plan on doing anything with it. And your players will maybe kill that NPC, or they'll look at the ring and they'll be like, oh shit, what's this ring mean? And you've hooked them. That's what they're interested in. And you can take that and make it mean whatever you want. They don't know that you have no idea what the fuck this ring is. All they know is there's a ring. And you're like, oh, this is awesome. So you can just kind of hand wave it and bring it up later. It's really fun. Players love it when you bring things back from the dead. And not from the dead as in literal dead. Sometimes it's awesome. Sometimes it's horrifying. But when you bring things back from sessions that have long gone by, and they suddenly make the connection that you've connected that moment with something they did a couple months ago, it blows their fucking minds. They love it. They eat that shit up. There was one point in time we had somebody tell me an experience they were having with their game, and a guy was playing a blood mage, but he only used his own blood. He didn't use anybody else's. He thought it was tainted. Like he didn't appreciate the quality of other people's bloods. He knew his was up to snuff. And what he did was he spent every last gold piece he had sleeping with every prostitute he could find. Now, the GM originally didn't want to let him do it, and the player took him aside and explained his plan and said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to catch diseases. Now, needless to say, this did not give our GM any type of confidence in his plan. But he managed to hang out. And basically what this guy said was, since I'm using my own blood magic and I'm getting these diseases, I can then spread these diseases to other people with my magic. And I thought about it, like, after I heard it, after he did it, and I'm like, that is actually a pretty fucking brilliant idea. It will lead to the death of your character, but he was willing to do that because he's like, I understand the risks of it, but, you know, I want to pick up bubonic plague at somebody and just fling that shit. So we had an encounter where this kobold, like a whole bunch of kobolds, and one kobold was running away. So the guy, as a last ditch, this was the last person in the encounter, and he was going to run away and tell these extra people and get us ambushed, pretty much. So what the blood mage did, he cut his hand and he threw blood at the guy as the kobold was running away. Nothing came of it. The thing kept running. I think it was something like 2.5 months later. We came in. It was a weekly, so something like 4, 8, 10 sessions later. I can hardly remember what I had for breakfast, let alone what we did last session sometimes. So we sit down. Guy's like, all right, everybody gets 34 XP. And and just dead silence around the whole table. And the one player looks up and goes, well, I'm going to roll a new character sheet. Why are we dying? And we all laughed. But he's like, no, you killed somebody. More silence around the table. Who did we kill? Did we get possessed? He's like, no, remember that guy, the kobold that he threw blood at? Yeah? Oh, he just died of AIDS. And we all kind of like, huh. That's pretty effing awesome. Like, not the AIDS dying, but the fact that he brought it back 2.5 months later. We had a really good session. Everybody was in really good humor. It was just a very interesting and awesome thing that the DM remembered to do that. He remembered our past and brought it into what was going on. The party didn't last much longer because we were all goofs in that campaign. We just kept goofing off the whole time. But that's the kind of stuff that they like doing. Like, even if it's stupid at the time, details matter to the players, and use that to help them and to craft new stories and new plot hooks. Now, I was going to do an interactive portion of giving random objects to you guys, and you would come up with a new thing, like some sort of backstory for it or how you would interact it with the group. But would anybody like to attempt that while we're here?
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah, I'll throw my hat in the ring.
Okay. Sure. So we have a piece of a well-polished wooden medallion, and it seems to have some sort of a wilted tree in the middle of it. There's no seams on it. It's innately crafted, and it is on a cord of hempen rope that, despite its age, has not frayed. And we'll go with, who wants to go first?
What exactly do you want us to do? Find a way to introduce this to a group of players, or?
Yeah, find a way to tie it into a story. Anything. Could be anything.
Oh, okay. Well, I can go first if nobody else wants to.
Sure.
If you want to go first, Wisconsin, sure. I'll go after.
All right, so we've got a wooden medallion, some hemp rope, well frayed. Well,
No,
you see,
no,
this
it
is
is-
an
it
ancient
is
druid's
not-
medallion. We're going to be playing D&D for this session.
Okay.
And it was carved off of the last great tree of a forest of sentient trees. Now, this tree, the medallion, was the heart of the tree. And the campaign, or how this is going to deal with the players, is they find it on a dying and aged old druid who is trying to do his last pilgrimage back to the forest of his youth where he was trained. So he's going to entrust this to the players. They need to get there to revitalize the forest, because without bringing the medallion back and renewing it, the forest will just wither and die. The downside to that is this forest was actually created by elves, because it was holding back an orcish horde. An orcish horde was invading an elven valley, and in their last spring of defense, they summoned up and basically put their life force into building this forest as a wall between them and the invading orcs.
Very nice.
Nice.
Set the bar pretty high on that one.
I said I wouldn't have to go first if somebody else wanted to.
Now, everybody else can go. I just want you to know that it does not have to be as spectacular as Wisconsin's.
Okay.
Just come up with
I said
something.
I'd throw my hat in the ring. Wisconsin had a similar idea to what I had,
Mhm.
which was I would describe it as the players have been sent, if we're going with the context of D&D, to travel through a rather decrepit and dark forest. And they've been tasked to figure out what's wrong with the forest, because recently it's been there's been strange things traveling through it. It's no longer very safe to travel through, but it's an important area to travel through in the sense that it connects two different regions that often trade, and it's the most convenient way to trade through. So the players will investigate the roads and kind of work their way around and eventually get deeper into the forest, where they'll find a corpse that appears to be almost growing into a tree. It's kind of like, imagine a tree that's almost opened up, and you have a corpse inside, and it's almost as if the tree was eating the corpse, and that medallion will be hanging off the corpse's neck.
Very nice.
And the context of it is that this forest is the origin of a rather tragic event, which I would only really go into detail at this point if the players sort of asked. But let's say in this case, you have an ancient people who gave up on living and enchanted themselves to become trees. And the reason by which they did so was they had a sacrifice. And that medallion was worn around the neck when that person was sacrificed, so that the magic necessary could turn them into trees and forests.
And that
And
could
give
lead
them a
into,
sense of intelligence.
yeah, that could lead to all sorts of things too, especially if they call it the Corpse Grove, where it was the site of a mad cult head, and people that he had enthralled all committing mass suicide in that valley. And the spot where each tree grows is where one of those corpses laid.
Yeah, and now the players have to figure out how can they basically remove the source of the taint in this forest. Do they take sort of the dark road and kind of find a new sacrifice, or do they try to find a way to undo this enchantment? Because the reality is that this particular road is important to the growth of these communities. They need to travel through it. These communities are dependent upon each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the angle I might use, and then I might, as sort of the players interact with it, I'd kind of try to relate it to their backstory a little bit, perhaps kind of throw in a hook where, they might find it interesting. But that would be the angle for me, which would be a sacrifice that was responsible for the health of this particular grove.
Very nice.
Dan,
you want to try?
Yeah. So let's say the group finds a university professor who knows magic. This is Shadowrun. And they walk into his office and show him this medallion. And at first the professor, he's very busy. He has papers all over the place. There's literally stacks of books. And he takes a glance at this thing and notices the lack of seams, and he mutters under his breath, "It can't be." And he literally knocks over a pile of books and pulls out this ancient tome. It's about maybe a foot thick, and he flips to a page, and he says, "It can't be. Where did you guys find this?" I guess let's say they found it. They found it in the old locker, in the Barrens, and he says this. This belonged to one of the most powerful druids of the fourth ward, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to bring this back for where it came. It's a very important artifact. It's probably worth millions. Yeah.
Excellent. See, and even if you don't elaborate on the background of it, that could be something that the players just wouldn't know. Like that was a fantastic setup for a medallion, and it gives them intrigue and purpose in order to move forward with the story. Again, even if he may not know anything about it, he just knows it's worth something. That is more than enough to get Shadowrunners invested. Because then they'll take that and be like, "Oh yeah, hey, this is worth millions." That's all they'll hear, and they'll get involved in some magical mystery as people start hunting them down, or the medallion curses them to, for that type of stuff. It could even be like a portal shift, like at random times when some unknown thing is met, all of a sudden they're in the astral plane, and they're going, "Oh shit, how do we get back?"
That's really cool.
Yeah, you can do pretty much, and like I said, that's instant. Like you can bullshit your way. If my thought has always been, as a GM, if you can bullshit your way till the end of the session, you can plan what happens next later. You just gotta make it to the end of the session to figure out what the hell just happened. C4 owns. You want to try? Sure.
The players they come across an older man who's torn from. He's got cuts all over him. His neck's torn out, and around what's left of his neck is the medallion. And when they go to search the body, they find a note. Now, depending on where you want it to be, if it's Shadowrun, it's e-paper, or if it's D&D, it's like an old falling apart parchment. And on it is just a simple letter that states that he couldn't complete his mission, that the vampires found him, and whoever finds his body, take his medallion back to his society to tell them that they've failed and that people need to come deal with this, that it's gone out of control.
Very nice. And see, something like that I could take as so they find the Shadowrunners find a headless body. That's the only thing that's identifying it. And as they go to various talismongers, they find out that there's an enchantment laid on it for a spell called Rooted Feet. And there's only been one made. They don't know who made it. So the Shadowrunners would then have to find out who made the original talisman. And you find out it was given to a surfer very popular surfer in the area, in order for him to stay on his board. That type of stuff. You can pretty much do anything you want with it. All right, good stuff, guys. Now we could do more, but I want to get done with the rest of this with you guys because there's a lot more good stuff to go.
Oh yeah.
Okay, things you are responsible for as a DM, and yes, unfortunately, we do have work we need to do as part of our chosen trade here. So the players have certain responsibilities and the DM has certain responsibilities. As far as the DMs go, take notes. It's always a good idea to take notes, because if you come up with a random ass name that you didn't even know of an NPC before you did it, write it down, because I guarantee that's going to come up back in the session sometime later. And even then, you can look back over your notes and be like, oh yeah, that's right, I made this NPC earlier. Maybe I can tie him into a bigger picture. And you have the part of the information already, and the players will recognize them. It's always helpful to have the notes, details, things that happened, rewards for a job. Things like this take place. Notes that have happened on the sessions help tremendously when planning your next steps, or aka writing your AARs. Sometimes it's always nice to have a set of notes to go back on while you're writing those after-action reports. That way you can adequately tell what happened without missing certain key parts. And I already told the Blood Mage story, so everybody knows about that. Be prepared. That's another big one. Everybody forgets dice. Everybody forgets a pencil every now and then. But as a DM, if you show up without materials, it looks ridiculously unprofessional and sloppy. If you forget your books, if you forget your notes, and there are excuses for it. Things happen, But if you're consistently unprepared, it does not paint a good picture of you to the players. You'll have to end up doing a lot more work to compensate for the things that you don't have, and that can really pull them out of immersion. Take a DM bag if you have to. I actually have the Think Geek bag of holding down on my feet right here, and that's where I keep all of my DM stuff. I keep extra pencils, I keep refills and erasers, the character sheets of anything that I'm doing personally, the books, and I just leave it there. That way, if I ever need it, I know that anything I need is in that bag. Players forget their pencils, and you can be bam, boom, pencil, done. Don't have to worry about it,
That reminds me, I need to order one of those.
Oh, they're a lot of fun. Try and get the leather briefcase of holding. It's actually like a professional, executive briefcase that has a shit ton of pockets in it. It's absolutely amazing.
I need to derail you there, but it reminded me.
No, it's cool. Know the rules. Unfortunately, to be a DM, you do need to know the rules. That doesn't mean you have to memorize the whole effing book from front to back. It's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you to do from one DM to another is that you know how your world works. That is very important, because if you're going to emulate the world, if you're going to be the challenges that your players face, you need to know how to adequately represent those challenges in mechanical form. There are forces in the world that dictate what they can and can't do. You are the world, you're the challenges, you're the enemies and the allies. You need to understand the difference between a blast and a burst and know how grappling works, figure out long-term endurance affects players, things like that. You don't need to know the specific rules, but you do need to know in general, from story to story, how to roll, what affects the players. I never do travel times. I hate traveling. I really do, especially in D&D, because people come up with those random ass encounter charts, and if I'm running into spiders, actually that's a different section. I will explain why I hate that in a minute. Continuity fucking sucks, but it's your responsibility to understand how the game works. You are guiding the players through and have to compensate for their lack of knowledge at points. Shadowrun's a little different, especially with a live community like the ShadowNet. You have to, sometimes it's the players that compensate for the DM's lack of knowledge. And that's simply because there's a lot to learn. And that's okay for the people to know their specific rules, but still, as a DM in general, you have to know what's going on and how to roll things. Right? I think that's a pretty easy thing to expect from a DM.
At least the basics, yeah.
So while you have to know the rules, you also have to forget the rules. That's another expectation. Some of the best villains I've ever played against are ones that go against the rules. That awesome king Yeah, he's totally enthralled an entire population. According to most rules, you can't enthrall more than, a handful of people at a time. This dude's found a way to break it. That Lich who froze the party, yeah, he's found a way to regenerate his phylactery, but only once. Generally, once it's broken, they have to make a new one. So something's pulling his strings to make sure that phylactery doesn't get destroyed the one time. Why? That's your job as a DM to figure out. Why is he breaking the rules? What's making him different than the rest of the enemies you've encountered? Have a mechanic character wanting to build a shield out of a car door. Realistically, car doors can't block bullets. I don't know if anybody knows that. But hiding behind a car door in a firefight is one of the worst fucking things you can do. Because it's literally a thin sheet of aluminum, probably a thing of glass, and another thin sheet of aluminum with padding. Most things will blow right through that. Mechanics in games, you can fudge a little bit. That's okay. You don't have to be realistic all the time, especially if they're excited about it. A few extra points of armor that would negate the awesomely set up team attack. If your players have all coordinated to make a fucking amazing attack, I'd let those extra couple points slide and let them feel the satisfaction of absolutely demolishing that thing and reward that teamwork. Yeah, they're not following the rules, but at the same time, they'll be telling that story for months to come, if not years. Just like with Epoch, I ignored some of the rules to let them have their moment and made it an intense match. And again, he still counts it as one of his best moments in role playing. And they don't care that they broke the rules; they just care that it was fucking awesome. I had when I was playing Godlike, we had actually pissed off our DM at one point by arguing too much over an insertion plan on a boat. We were on like a little cruiser. And after 2 hours of planning, he was bored. And you never want your DM to get bored, because bad things start happening. And in this particular case, he spawned 4 dive-bombing Stukas to attack the ship. So we all went up to the deck, and we were, disintegrating bombs and trying to shoot planes out of the sky. And my character was a hyper sniper. So I said, I'm going to try to headshot one of those planes. Let that sink in for a moment. I'm going to lay the scene out. It was a boat on choppy seas with a dive bomber coming in with a front propeller, and I wanted to headshot one of the pilots with a blind character. That's about the appropriate reaction. So he was blind, but he was actually shot better than most of the party. So the DM's like, okay, roll it. And he gave me all of the negatives, of how I would be doing. Basically, it kept eating dice. The way that particular system worked, you only had to get basically had to have your action go before the person's reaction, because you would roll at the same time. If you got higher, you won. So the dive bomber wasn't really going to try to avoid me, because what the fuck is a sniper going to do on a boat, against a plane? I got exactly what I needed to roll in order to headshot him. And so basically, he described it really well, that, I waited for that perfect moment where the boat was coming down and my gun just lined up and I fired and it went right through the propellers, hit the angled glass and ricocheted up into his fucking nose and blew his head off. I'm like, yes! The whole party got up and was fucking cheering, and we were making a whole shit ton of ruckus. And then he's like, and then somebody stopped and looked at the GM, who was just smiling. And he went, guys, there's a problem. He's smiling. And everybody stopped for a minute and went, wait, the plane's coming toward us, right? Yep. And he just killed the pilot. Yep. Sarge, you fucking bastard, I can't believe you made that shot. Whole party turned against me in a heartbeat. It was great. I still tell that story to this day because it was one of the greatest moments I've ever had as a player. And the instant, back turn against from my fellow players was amazing. I got ribbed for that for so long. because I didn't think about it. Yeah, headshot of them. Now we have a giant, like, 10, 15 ton piece of machinery flying toward us with no pilot. Shit. We're fucked.
Possibly more effective than the bomb would have been.
Exactly. Potentially. So yeah, know the rules, but forget the rules. Sometimes it makes a fucking awesome scene if you just kind of let that rule slide. Work on your vocab, another big part of it. Vocab is a big part of descriptions. Your lexicon is distinct in describing situations to your characters that help them feel at home. And it helps to know what the words mean. Instead of dark, there's a couple different words that you can say instead of dark. Dark is a general descriptor. Currently, it's dark in my basement. Okay? So if I told you it was dark and you walked into something, you'd be like, all right, it's dark. But if I told you it's dreary, it was dreary outside on that London evening, it gives a completely different connotation than just dark, right?
Oh, yeah.
What does dreary mean to you guys? Not so much the
Depressing.
official definition, but...
I guess that it's kind of miserable.
Yeah.
Like, it's not somewhere you want to be.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like, that you can't see it or anything. It's just like, why am I here?
What about morose?
Lethargic, like a slow and depressive.
Depressive is a good one.
I guess oppressive would be the word I would use, like a funeral or something.
Yeah. Malignant. It's another good word. See, each
Icky.
of the... Exactly. Malignant. Stagnant. It's disgusting. It's brooding, almost. Malignant night. And all of those describe distinctly different things. And all you had to do was change the word that was used. And it gave a completely different scene than what you're trying to build. Instead of telling how the corpse looks, describes how it smells. Remember when I described that you could taste the maggots eating their flesh, even though you couldn't, just from their smell? Blah. I don't know, if somebody, DM told me that shit, I'd get the creeps. I don't even want to think about how a maggot tastes, let alone to try to eat one. But that's a big impact. Use words like fetid. Fetid, that disgusting rotting, it's rotten but worse if it's fetid. Decadent, bloated, malted, but then again, you can use things like faded grandeur instead of rotten. So, if you walk into an old hall, it's not a rotten hall. Some of the tapestries may be rotted, but it itself isn't really rotted. Rotted doesn't describe it. But things like faded grandeur, dusty, morose, again, I use that word again. Things like that can carry more weight than what you were trying to describe, and that really pushes the players farther into immersion. It also helps you sound a lot smarter too, which is never a bad thing when it comes to your players. So I'm gonna call on somebody real quick. Forones.
Yeah.
I want you to do a brief description of a swamp for me. Any swamp that you want. Doesn't matter what's going on in it. I just want a description of a swamp.
All right. Yeah. Okay. You walk out of the falling apart hut into this ground that's slightly squishing from the water that's underneath your shoes. As you look out, you see trees jutting up out of the water, roots. The roots trying to find some ground to secure the trees. You also hear toads and crows and going and cawing and making noise as the smell of
Rot?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, rot and
It's okay. I mean, it's a good general description of a swamp. try to use different meaning words. Things like the trees. You can use the limbs have cascaded down almost as prison bars, blocking out the stars from the sky, or the way the water smells or looks is another good way to get the immersion from your players. Basically, if you were standing right there with your players, how would you perceive the world around you? And that you can use to effectively get them in character. Because sometimes they just want to goof off, but if they can see what you're trying to portray to them, it will instantly get them in character. Dan, I want you to describe a dwarven mead hall.
Oh wow. This place has probably been here hundreds of years. You see on the wall marks. This culture, when a man matures, they'll mark his name on the wall, and you literally see hundreds of names written on this wall, with the year marked by. The floors are sticky. It's recently spilled, but it's still a nice suction sound when you lift off your foot.
Almost as if the floor is trying to keep you in place, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you get this general sense that time has stopped here. Stories of the past are flowing by. You catch glimpses of battles you've heard of, famous victories. And there's a roaring fireplace that is the heartstone of this establishment. And you see a very proud man wearing the most ridiculously tall hat you've seen in your life. And his suit is faded, but he carries himself as the...
It's all right. How does it smell? How does the place smell?
It smells like a wood shop, it smells like old wood, but it also smells like battle. This is obviously a place where the warriors will come after a fight.
Okay. How does it sound?
You hear the stories flowing back and forth, but again you hear this large fire crackling in the background. It's almost like the beat of the drum to the song.
Nice. What do you guys think?
Pretty good.
Did you feel it?
Oh yeah.
Pretty good.
Pretty good image, yeah.
I felt it. I felt it in my heart.
The drums, they got me. Ba-dum.
I would do a couple things as well. Maybe describe like uproarious laughter of a group nearby that's sharing a funny story. Just small things to make it that you look and all of the names on the walls are faded, but they're almost permanent. Like there's a sense of permanence there that these people will be remembered on for the rest of creation, as long as somebody looks on their name, despite the faded glory type stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was great. It was pretty good. Dagon, you want to try?
What would you like me to describe?
Tell me about a steampunk tea room.
Steampunk tea room. This will be an interesting one. I'm not
Oddly specific.
Steampunk. All right. As you walk through the hallway, it's rather darkly lit, and you're led to a nearby door where the man leading you, he looks back at you. You can see his monocle shining as another sort of lens flicks in front of it, and he kind of looks you over a little bit critically, and then goes, "Yes, she will see you now." And then he kind of opens the door, and as he opens the door, You're given the image of weightlessness almost as you kind of step out onto a glass floor and you can see the sky below you. You look up and there's a woman. She's dressed in a pleated dress. It looks fancy, but it also is divided as if she would be able to ride. And she kind of looks up at you. Oh, good, you're here. Sit down. As you look down, you notice that there's one other chair as well as a small table. And it gives you almost the impression, once again, of weightlessness, of floating, and the realization that you are no longer on the ground, that in fact, you're perhaps a little bit out of your element, comes to your mind as she smiles at you.
Very nice. I like it.
Nice, yeah.
Wisconsin. Let's
Yes,
see. A sewer. I want you to describe a sewer maintenance closet.
A sewer maintenance closet.
Yep.
That's actually kind of difficult. As the party walks through the sewer and its dampness, the sewage and excrement sloshing alongst their boots, they reach their target where their quarry is. As they've been chasing a toxic rat shaman through the sewers. This is set in Shadowrun, obviously. They come to what they believe to be its burrow as the single light above the door flickers, and they can kind of see the half-faded words of maintenance over that have been rubbed and scratched out. The door hanging on its last hinges. You open it, and as you do, vermin scurry across out past your feet. You can, step on a few of them, but it's more of a wave than a trickle. Looking inside to this unholy maintenance closet, the first thing that you see is the first thing you smell would be the waft of the chemicals spilt, bleach, cleaning materials, some Ajax, whatever that is. You heard your grandmother talking about it back in the the early 2000s. In the corner there is what appears to be once a pile of dirty laundry with maintenance worker uniform barely visible through the faded fabric, and inside you see a faint quivering as the rat shaman jumps at you.
There you go.
Nice.
Very nice. You can even go so far.
Maintenance closet.
Yeah.
Really, a maintenance closet?
A maintenance closet. There you go. You did a good job with it. It was difficult, but you did it. I appreciate
it is
it.
hard.
But that was the point of the exercise, was to get you guys to get a little bit out of your element and focus on something and describing something directly from your point of view and your mind's eye, even if it was snap decisions. But it fucking makes it easier for you to realize that when your players walk in, they have just as fresh of a perspective than you do. So if you've designed the scenario in mind, they approached it just like you guys did. So, if we're talking about that maintenance closet, Wisconsin, you probably would have had time to come up with different ways to show what that is. But when they walk into it, that is fresh for them. That's totally 100%. They have no idea what's going on. So your first impressions and your descriptions are what will really bring it home for them and help them, stay in character pretty much. Next rule of this, flip it like a pancake. You want to keep things fresh, and you don't want one side to burn, so you flip it over so you can cook the other side, right? You want to do the same thing with your DMing. As adventurers go, players get pretty complacent. They eventually start getting into a pattern of things. I'm going to run up and I'm going to hit it. Okay, next turn, I'm going to hit it again. I'm going to hit it harder this time. And it can get pretty boring after a while. So, fighting waves upon waves of enemies time after time, getting loot, selling the loot, buying new things, and doing the same thing over again gets really, really boring. And that's actually one of the big complaints of D&D so far, is the fact that it's so combat-oriented that it feels like you're just rolling dice to hit things with a very, very thin layer of roleplay on the top. And most of at least the best DMs that I know, don't do that. They don't do it consistently, at least. Combat is still a big part of how we roleplay. But they don't let it get to the point where players are complacent. It's not an MMO. This isn't a walk up, get me 5 wolf pelts, come back and I'll give you a piece of armor. It doesn't work that way. So if it starts becoming stale, flip it on his head. The big bad guy foiled them again. Have someone kill him. I mean, the players are getting ready to exact their justice and revenge, and they're getting excited. Oh, somebody killed him already. Well, shit. And he's getting away. You'd better fucking chase him. And now you got to figure out, now they have to figure out what exactly is going on. And I would only do this after the big bad guys escape 2 or 3 times. And they're like, oh shit, we're going to beat him. He's going to escape. No, he's actually dead. I'm sorry, what? He's dead? We didn't even get to kill him? Now they have to chase the guy that killed him to figure out what's going on. Oh, hey, they have all the best armor and gear in the game, and they're not afraid of anything. Well, they'll be afraid of a rust elemental. Them shits suck. Because you hit it with a sword, hey, there's no more sword. So, and that makes them think laterally. It's like, oh shit, how do we get out of this? I was playing a zombie game. I was using the D20 modern rules. And I wanted to do something different than the regular zombie, right? Because zombies, zombies, it can be interesting. I wanted to do something different. So I had the original outbreak. Like, they were there when the people were turning. They were in a university and they were trying to get out. So after they locked themselves in a science room, and this was one of the encounters I had pre-planned before the situation. And that was basically, they're like, we're running. First door we see, we're going into it. Ha ha ha. This fits right into my encounter. So they run in, shut the door behind them. They're in a science, they're like a chemical lab. And there's an ash wraith there. It's a cloud that when it touches you, a cloud of ash, when it touches you, it burns you. And if it gets into your lungs, you're dead. Because it just burns your whole respiratory system. So one person tried to swing a pipe at it. It's like, well, shit. I mean, he was the jock. He's the big burly athlete. So he's like, fuck this shit. Goes to swing at it, blows right through it, falls through it, and burns his body. Not really badly because he only fell through it, but it was unexpected. They're like, oh shit, we can't actually hit it. What the fuck do we do? So they were doing everything that they could. They were pulling desks apart. They were throwing things at it. And finally, one guy's like, dude, there's a fire extinguisher. It's hot. Maybe we could do something with this. And I had not thought of this before. But I rolled with it. I'm like, yeah, sure, you can try. It ended up solidifying it a little bit so they could hit it and do some damage. But it was the one person that's like, wait a minute. It's ash, right? Yeah. And it's pretty, not incorporeal, but insubstantial. That's the word I'm looking for. It was insubstantial. And they're like, yeah, well, what do all science labs have? None of the party said anything. They couldn't think of it. They have vents. They have vents to keep chemicals from burning everybody on the outside. And everyone's like, oh my God, break the vent. So they go over to the hooded vent. It was locked. So they took the fire extinguisher, started breaking the shit out of it, and finally opened it, got the wraith next to it, and hit the emergency vent. And it sucked it right out of the room. And it was like, for them, that was amazing because they were completely blown away that I had come up with a zombie that did not actually, could not be killed in a conventional way. And they were really impressed. They loved it. It really got them into the situation that, oh shit, we're facing things that we may not be aware of as far as zombie lore goes. So that was my flipping it like a pancake moment. That was my, yeah, you can kill the regular zombies, but there are other things out there that want to kill you that you may not be prepared to fight. So it was pretty fun. Avoid character control if at all possible. There are certain systems where that's almost a necessity, such as Fate, where you have to compel other players to act within their nature. You basically but that has an exchange. Basically, you're giving them a fate point to tell them what happens with their character. And fate points are very powerful in that game. So basically, you're giving them the ability to change the story at any point for you changing the story then. But overall, you want to try to avoid character control. Let the players play their own characters. Avoid saying things like, your character hears, or out of nowhere, you parry an attack. Because that's you saying what their character does. It's not them acting. Even passive action should only give the player an interest into what's there. difference between active and passive, something people don't quite get a grasp on really well, because they'll be like, oh yeah, it's within your passive perception, this is what you see. No. Passive perception is the shit that you catch just in your peripheral. It's enough to, so if your passive perception, meets the criteria, this is D&D specific. A lot of other places, a lot of other systems use passive qualities too, but basically it'll be like, oh yeah, you see gold over there. Well, no, you see something flicker. That's all you get. Oh shit, there might be something over there. Maybe we should investigate it. And that's when you roll active perception, because you're actively looking for it. Same thing with intent. Is it intent? I think it's called intent. Insight. Sorry.
Insight.
Yep.
Yeah.
So passive insight. You feel like he's not telling you the truth. Roll insight. Oh, okay. So passive insight is something. Passive is when you just barely catch something, and that makes them get interested in it, and they can then roll their checks.
Those are two systems that I personally really love. It gives the players some way to interact with the players, or the GM a way to interact with the players without feeling like they're giving them something.
Exactly. Do not speak for the players. Do not make constant suggestions on how to play their characters. In fact, I would go so far as to say limit the amount of interaction that other players can force on other characters. We all have experienced that one person that's the commander. I like to call them the commander. They tell all the other characters what to do in order to make the plans go forth. Now, sometimes this is a good idea. John does this very well in his games. He manages to suggest good plans to move forward, especially with people who don't know the Shadowrun system really well. The problem comes when these people understand how to play or don't understand to play their characters, and this commander will not allow them to do so and will continue to make their moves for them. So they don't quite get how to fit into the party or how to utilize their own character. I don't allow that at my table. I always say you get like 2 sentences. If they get bad, I limit it. But basically, it's you have advice. They can follow it or they cannot. After a certain amount of time, shut the hell up and let them make their decision. And it just lets everybody get comfortable with how they want to play their characters. So you as a DM, don't do it for them. Describe what happens and let them react. It allows them to keep in character more if you can say, and the flash of a blade comes out of nowhere. Do you parry? And they're going to say, shit, yes, I parry. They parry. But it's not you saying you parry an attack. You kind of see the little difference there. It gives the player their agency.
It's subtle but important.
Exactly. It's subtle. Exactly. It's subtle, but it's very important. It allows the player to stay in character and not feel like they're being controlled. It's just more suggestion than anything. And the very last part of this one is be the trees. Yes, that is as stupid as it sounds. But it's know your history and your surroundings of where your players are. Be the trees of the area. Of the forest that you guys are in, where did those trees come from? Were they planted a long time ago? Is this just a naturally occurring forest? Excuse me, sorry guys. A loud ruckus in the woods may lead a pack of dire wolves to the location. So if you guys are making a shit ton of noise in your party, when you're trying to be quiet, something's going to notice. And that would make a great time to have, say, a pack of direwolves come and investigate what these loud noises are. And nobody likes it when a pack of direwolves comes and investigates what's going on. So it might teach them to be a little bit quieter in the future. You launch a spell bomb, a massively powerful spell, and it blows a hole in a huge crater in the earth. But it reveals a set of ruins there. What were the ruins? Did you know the ruins were going to be there? Well, you might. That's the type of thing that you want to be aware of, because that can lead to interesting scenarios in and of itself. Keep tidbits of where everything's going on around you in mind in case the unexpected happens. Because you can always make, again, those details matter, as we said before. And the last couple ones we have, being your enemy. Being the enemy of the party, designing encounters. The reason I decided to add this to the GM is because it's sometimes it's really hard to gauge encounters, especially in Shadowrun. You don't know how your players are going to be able to handle what you're throwing at them. Especially since it's not a level base, it's a karma base. There could be, players that are 50, 60 karma above and still be on an equal level to somebody that just started out. So sometimes it's hard to design these encounters. And there's a couple big things I can tell you guys to help with that. Sometimes a smaller number of big enemies is better than a large number of small enemies. And